Back on the 0 Hour. I, as always, am your host, Richard RJ Eskow. I've appreciated my next guest's work for a long time, both writing and hosting, video and so on, video commentary. I will continue to admire her work, I imagine, but there's one less place where I'll be admiring it, and that is the journalistic outlet known as The Hill, because my guest Katie Halper was fired from The Hill for commentary she submitted about, well, I'll let her tell the rest of the story. But first of all, Katie Halper, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah, good to have you. So you've told this story a million times by now, and I'm sorry to make you repeat it. But you want me to tell it because I read about it?
It's up to you. I can tell it again.
Yeah, tell it again if you don't mind.
Yeah. So I was a regular guest at The Hill for like 3 years. I would appear on The Hill every week to do a segment on the media and politics. And then in addition to that, I did some guest hosting. And when you are a host, you get to do these things called radars, which are basically monologues. And I know from talking to my friends who are hosts there or used to be hosts there that there's no editorial process. You submit your radar, they put it in, you email your radar the night before, they put it in the teleprompter, and then you record it, and then it's released. They do, Ryan Grimm, for instance, says he did like 150 of them. He estimates, and never got anything held up or cut. So I went in there, I did my guest hosting, and then I did my radar. And what I decided to do for my radar, so for my monologue, again, these radars are just monologues straight to the camera, is I wanted to talk about the Rashida Tlaib statements, where she said that progressives are realizing more and more that you can't be progressive and support the apartheid state, Israel's apartheid government. And then she got a lot of pushback, from the usual suspects, the ADL, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Jake Tapper, who has a habit of picking on Rashida Tlaib, also has a habit of being pretty Islamophobic. In fact, there were Jewish Voice for Peace protested him a couple years ago over some of the things that he said. He did a segment on it. A lot of members of Congress spoke out against her. And then, of course, all the trolls that you get online on Twitter. So I wanted to do a video that both defended her, but also because one of the things that Jonathan Greenblatt of the Anti-Defamation League of the ADL said in his response was that Israel is not an apartheid state. So to me, that seems like something that is very documentable. And so what I did is I wrote my monologue about that, and I made my case by citing the UN, International Criminal Court, because apartheid is actually a defined crime. So obviously the term comes from, it's an Afrikaans word, and it was the official policy in South Africa. But it's also, in the 70s, it was recognized as a crime by the UN. So I cited the UN, the International Criminal Court, human rights organizations, Palestinian human rights organizations, international ones like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, and B'Tselem, which is an Israeli human rights organization. All of these people, these entities have argued that it's an apartheid state. Then I cited Israeli officials, ministers, former and prime ministers. Some prime ministers said it when they were prime ministers, that either it was an apartheid state or would be an apartheid state if the two-state solution weren't reached, and of course it hasn't been reached. And then I kind of brought it home with quoting Nelson Mandela, Desmond Tutu, and a present-day foreign minister of foreign affairs from South Africa, who just a few weeks ago said at the UN General Assembly that the consensus is that it's an apartheid state. And she actually cited Daniel Levy, who himself was a negotiator at the Oslo Peace Accords. So I did that. I recorded it. They filmed it. I left, and then I was told that they wouldn't be releasing it. The producers were lovely. They tried to do the right thing, which hopefully is not a fireable offense, that they were on the right side of history. But the higher ups didn't want to release it. And so I spent a couple days going back and forth with the producers, trying to figure out a way to maybe reach some kind of compromise. Because what they told me when they told me they weren't going to run it is that a producer said she didn't know that they had this new policy where they're not doing op-eds on Israel. The Hill is not doing op-eds on Israel. So they're neither allowing for written pieces, written op-eds, nor are they allowing for these video op-eds, these radars, these monologues. But she said that they did say that you could still do segments on it. And again, it's a little nomenclature-y, but inside baseball maybe, but I would go on as a guest. I would do segments as a guest. So my understanding was that I could still talk about it as a guest. I just couldn't do a straight opinion piece straight to camera. So we're going back and forth. We're saying maybe we can run the radar, but then have someone from the opposing side respond to it, or maybe I can have a debate afterwards, or, I'm trying to see if this is going to be released. And then Bob Cusack, who's the editor-in-chief of The Hill, calls me, tells me he's not going to release it. So then I texted the producers and asked if I could then do it for my segment, because this was on a Wednesday, and I tape my weekly segments Thursday morning. Then they're released on Saturdays. And then I was told to check my email, and that's where I saw I had an email where a Nexstar executive,
Nexstar owns The Hill, right?
Yeah, we'll get into that in a second. But she said, we're not going to be needing you for your segment tomorrow. Please give us any outstanding invoices. Best of luck. Which shocked me. I mean, it really did shock me, because I thought that, I've been a contributor there every week, basically, taking a couple weeks off when they had a switch over when Sagar and Crystal left Rising, and new hosts came in. But so I guess it was a little naive for me, though, of me to think that they would not do that, given how they were responding.
I don't think it was naive. I mean, if you don't mind my opinion, it doesn't feel naive to me at all, because it seems to be, first of all, there was a rule supposedly that you hadn't heard about. Does that extend to pro-Israel commentary too, or they didn't tell you?
And also I should add that to defend myself from my own allegation of naivete, I've done several segments as a guest on Israel.
Well, and it also seems to me, Katie, it seems to me, sometimes people get censored or edited, and they're intransigent, and maybe they have a right to be, and so they lose a job, because it's like, okay, if you don't want to do what we say, then you can't work for us. Okay, that can be wrong too if it's political censorship. But I kind of tracked this thing that happened with you in The Hill, and you were like, definitely not doing that, because you were saying, well, I didn't realize, can we do it this way? Can we do it that way? And then all of a sudden it's like, pack up your desk, you're out of here. So it's nobody said, if you keep pressing this issue, you're going to lose this gig, right? I mean,
no, said that. I had no indication. So it really did shock me. And what I had been doing is that, because I didn't know whether they were going to release it, I had reached out to Breakthrough News, and I was like, I have this video idea that I really want to get out there. And I may not be able to get out there where I shot it. So I was already planning with them. And because at that point I was like, maybe they won't release it, but they'll let me make my case in the form of being a guest. And it is a real thing to think about. It's like, well, I want to, that gives me a large reach, The Hill. The aesthetic of the show adds a lot of legitimacy to it, for better or for worse, that people see stuff that looks like it's a professional set. And I think, I don't mean legitimacy towards me, Katie Halper, gives me gravitas. I mean, gives the things I'm saying, and I spend a lot of time saying stuff about Israel, I think a sense of gravitas and legitimacy that you don't get necessarily from just doing it from your home.
Yeah,
which is how I do my shows.
Right. He agreed sheepishly. Yes, but yes, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was willing to, if they let me do it as a as a segment, as a discussion. I wasn't being like you said, there are people who would quit at any push back, and that's a principled position. I made the calculation that if I'm allowed to keep getting these stories out there, then I'll just keep doing that. And so that's what I was trying to do. And then I got that email, and I was like, okay, so we're making this video with Breakthrough News, which is an independent media organization. I'll make their video, and also I'll include the fact that this was a video that I was not allowed to make at the Hill because I wanted to at that point. Like, I thought it was important to expose them.
Well, and I think it's especially important because the Hill in particular is called the Hill for Capitol Hill. It's one of a couple trade papers, for lack of a better term, right, for staffers and congressional staffers and people around the city of Washington and all of that. A lot of people read it, and the people who read it influence policy. Right. So if there's all of a sudden a kind of see nothing, hear nothing policy towards an issue that's central to U.S. foreign policy, morally as well as in other ways, that's a story I think people should know about.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I said at one point when I was texting, I was like, so what if they said no coverage of Saudi Arabia?
Right. Which, yeah, absolutely. Now nobody ever said to you, Katie Halper, this is why we're parting ways with you. Nobody ever said, well, you pushed the envelope too far. It was just, well, just send in your remaining invoices and have a nice life, right?
Yeah. Best of luck.
So have you been able to, and then I want to talk a little bit about the content of what you said, because I think it puts this all in context. But first, just getting through the mechanics of what happened, if you don't mind. Do you have any sense of, did this have to do with the owners of the Hill? Did it have to do with not wanting to alienate certain important sources that might, stop feeding stories, kind of beat sweetener thing? Or do you have any idea what the motivation was here?
Branko Marcetic at Jacobin wrote a really good piece. It's called Left-Wing Journalist Katie Halper has been fired for calling Israel an apartheid state. But really what's very interesting about it is he looks at Nexstar, which again is the company that bought The Hill back in August. And just for some, I'm going to just quote his piece. So this month, Psagot Value Holdings Limited, an investment firm based in Tel Aviv, bought 6,100 shares of Nexstar to the tune of more than $1 million. In late August, Nexstar filled the position of deputy managing editor of News Nation, its cable channel, with Jake Novak, a journalist who spent the preceding year and a half as the media director of the Israeli Consulate General in New York. He has written approvingly of Donald Trump's dropping of U.S. support for the two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and he has advocated for Israel to build more illegal settlements, that would make up a hypothetical Palestinian state, saying, quote, it would bring more peace, prosperity, and freedom to both Israelis and Arabs. 6 days before the announcement of his hiring, Novak led a presentation at Bar-Ilan University titled Defending Israel Against Media Bias, How to Fight News Media and Social Media Bias Against Israel, the best defense is a good offense. So
they've certainly been doing that. And, we've seen journalists right and left getting fired or getting, just around the same time your situation was happening. And New York Times, you probably know about this, but a New York Times photographer was fired because on Facebook he had expressed support for the Palestinian cause, while, as you point out, and others have pointed out, you've got three columnists at three writers at the New York Times who have sons in the Israeli Defense Forces, and yet that's not considered a conflict of interest. They're allowed to write about Israel, right? So it's clear that the pushback is getting extremely aggressive. We've seen AIPAC using its PAC money to target politicians who criticize Israel. And to me, it seems the story here, as I know you understand, Katie, is way, way bigger than you or me, or I haven't gotten in trouble for Israel for some weird reason, but Nathan J. Robinson, whoever it might be,
Martha Mondale. I wrote a piece at the Daily Beast that goes through a lot. Some of the people have been in trouble over this. Yeah.
Yeah, but the story, I mean, Zed Jelani and some other people at Think Progress back, it goes back a ways, but it's intensifying. But to me, this ties into the whole notion that the response here should be censorship, fear, the instilling of fear in journalists to bring up the issue, to speak out on the issue, while we're condemning, the killing of Khashoggi, where there was a column by Nicholas Kristof last week calling for press freedom on the anniversary of Khashoggi's murder that did not mention Julian Assange, did not mention Edward Snowden, did not mention anybody. It seems that we're increasingly blind to an accelerating process of censoring people. This is maybe the main hot button issue where the censorship is taking place. But to me, it's all part of a normalization of state and quasi-state and, corporate censorship. Do you agree with me?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. And I think that something scary is that we do see I guess I understand where it comes from, but I think the left is being a little myopic about the censorship question. I think that because of Donald Trump, the odious individual that he is, but I think that the response to that on the left has some segments of the left have kind of embraced censorship. In response to that, or in what they think is a response to that, and that's pretty dangerous because the people who always suffer the most from censorship are the left. And in fact, Palestinians are the people who suffer the most. I mean, there's just been systemic censorship, shutting down Palestinian journalist accounts. Facebook engaged in that a lot. And this is I think the issue that you really get most censored on, or one of the issues that you get most censored on. And, I'm not comparing myself in a million years to Shireen Abu Akleh, but I am talking about there is a spectrum, obviously, and I'm way at the other end of it, which is someone I just talk about what's happening there. She was there on the ground and obviously paid with her life because she was killed by the IDF. But this is an issue that if you talk about it, if you report on it the way that someone like Shireen Abu Akleh does and other really brave journalists there, especially Palestinian journalists, you could lose your life or you could get injured. So I'm not at all comparing myself. I guess I'm contrasting myself to them because of the sacrifices they make. But it is, even in my very privileged world, it can be, and again, I'm relatively lucky. This was not my only source of income. I have the Katie Halper show. I have Useful Idiots. But it's upsetting to be shut out from an audience, a large audience. And of course, it is nice to get paid to host.
Well, of course it is. To me, and by the way, you do Useful Idiots now with Aaron Mate, but used to be with, and maybe sometimes still is with, my good friend Matt Taibbi, who, we talk about this stuff all the time, every time, this overall censorship of journalism and sort of liberal submission to the national security control of, and admiration for the FBI. I just spoke earlier about, we now have seen 40 years of FBI surveillance on Aretha Franklin. You can't love the Queen of Soul and love the FBI in my book. But be that as it may, it is, you have suffered financial and other loss. And I think part of the tactic is the hope is people will see that.
Yeah.
Other people who might want to comment on Israel. But Katie, the thing that struck me when I watched your band commentary and read the text, and what struck me about it was two things. One, like you, I'm Jewish, which, has immediately for 50 years been swept aside by the phrase self-hating Jew. I first heard my uncle tell me that when I was a teenager, that I was a self-hating Jew. And so many times that I finally said, no, but I'm going to be a you-hating Jew if you keep this up. But that's one. But the other thing that struck me, Katie, and I have to say that besides the fact that it was really, and I don't say this like beautifully written, beautifully done.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was in its own way, it had a gentleness about it. It had, I'm trying to remember, it ended by saying, yes, after you clearly make this case that apartheid is a legal entity, Israel meets the definition of it. Here's why. Here are other people who have brought that up. Here are other people who have been punished. But you end up by saying, and of course, this is supposed to be the time of reflection and repentance, right? And atonement. Yeah, you end by saying, instead of I'm paraphrasing you, of course, but instead of attacking people who call Israel what it is, let's try to imagine. And instead of believing that means automatically calling for the destruction of Israel, instead try to imagine what an Israel would look like that is not an apartheid state.
Well, I actually say what a post-apartheid country would
look like. A post-apartheid, yeah, okay.
And I do say country because I want to leave. I don't know what it's going to look like, honestly. And that's like a whole other discussion. But I don't know if it's two-state or one state. I know a lot of people think that a two-state solution is no longer viable.
Right.
I want to do a big show on this on the Katie Halper show, actually, because I know that there's a lot of debate about that.
Right, and I asked a journalist, based in Israel, from another Middle Eastern country, but I said, do you agree with my perception that the two-state solution is dead? And he said, I don't want to answer. I'm inclined to say yes, but that's really for the Palestinian people to decide what they want, and of course, then to work that out. But your point was, to me, that's why, it's kind of beautiful, really, because what you're really saying is, we can imagine, and thank you for the correction on country, because that's important, but we can imagine better futures rather than censoring people for pointing out what's going on in the present. And I thought that was, if anything, ending on a light touch.
And I also say Lashana Tova.
Right, I caught that too. So, and that Rabbi Alyssa Wise, I don't know if you know her. I don't know her that well, but she tweeted the other day, the Jewish people collectively have a lot to atone for this year, but I mean, that's not a popular opinion in a lot of places. And, so first of all, I just wanted to point that out, that you ended on a positive. This was not a hate screed. You know what I mean? It was just an observation of a terrible thing that's being done, and the fact that Israel has become an apartheid state. There really was, I don't know what you think, but I felt for a long time that there's no, especially with the injection of all the settlements into Palestinian land, that there's no way out of this other than real democracy or absolute theocracy / apartheid state, which is historically unstable. So
right.
I don't think there's a peaceful future that doesn't involve recognizing that Israel is an apartheid state, I guess I would say.
Right. I agree. Wait, say that again. You don't think there's a future?
I'm not going to say it again because you agreed, and that's binding. So no.
Yeah, I think.
No, but what I said is, let me not use negatives. Okay, I think the only way to a peaceful future is by acknowledging that what currently exists is an apartheid state and a nascent theocracy, so that something can be built that is stable in its place. Because I don't think that situation will ever be. Not only is it morally wrong, it's not. It doesn't last. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I hope that's true. I don't know, though. They've been able to maintain it for so long. And now, of course, they talk about that. Some people talk about very problematically about a demographic threat. But the thing is, you have a lot of people coming to Israel and Orthodox Jews having a lot of kids. And so it's not, I think, going to be as untenable as people used to think to maintain an apartheid state.
No, of course you might be right, but I feel as if world opinion in most places and opinion here among younger people is shifting. And, I am old enough to have lived through the collapse of public support for South African apartheid, which, Reagan was a defender of. It was mainstream to defend apartheid in this country for a long time. When it started to go, it went. And when it went, that support, there was going to be a point, the clock began ticking on the end of the apartheid state in South Africa. Of course, it's a very, I can't back it up with data, but this is my feeling about what's happening now with the way Israel is governed today.
Right. I mean, I think that's true, but I also think that Israel has on its side something that they've really weaponized, and it's very unfortunate and tragic and pretty, I think, disgusting. Unlike South Africa, they have, I want to say this delicately because it isn't something that should be weaponized, but the Holocaust, anti-Semitism, that lets them, I think, conflate any kind of criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism, which of course does a major disservice to fighting actual anti-Semitism, because they've trivialized anti-Semitism because they say things that are not anti-Semitic or anti-Semitic.
Right.
I do think that people have more sympathy. I mean, it is changing, but it's also one of these things where popular opinion and public policy, there's a big difference between those two things.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
For sure. And that is a major issue. And, you point out in your commentary that anti-Semitism is real. It needs to be fought. It's a terrifying and awful thing. But in the end, we have to face up to, especially those of us who, you point out, and I've pointed this out too. I could go to Israel now.
Right.
I could go and, according to Orthodox Jews, my mother's conversion was not valid, but it doesn't matter. I could still go. I could say, my grandfather was as Jewish and grandmother was Jewish as they get. My great grandfather was a senior rabbinical judge. I could go tomorrow and become a citizen, as you point out in your piece, you could. And Palestinians who have been fighting for their homes for generations can't get them back, have no right of return. Right. And that's just something that we, with our very specific privilege in this case, to me, it's a complicated subject, but to me, because we have faced anti-Semitism, and because certainly for my father's generation, they weren't, maybe they were white, but they were not white. My father lost jobs because of he was Jewish, and a lot of things, a lot of real bias there. Kind of, I equate it to what a lot of Muslims face today. The same hateful cartoons with the big noses and anti-Semitism is real. It shapes generations of Jews. It needs to be fought, but it also gives us, I think, a special obligation to call out the moral challenge that we face, which is to correct this wrong that you've described. Does that sound reasonable to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is, does sound reasonable. I think that that's something that really does need to be done. And, yeah, I think that, if you're a Jew, I think it's really important to show the world that Jews are not a monolith, that AIPAC doesn't represent all of us, that the ADL doesn't represent all of us, that ironically it's it's anti-Semitic to suggest that Jewish identity and support of Israel are the same thing. I mean, that's what people try to suggest with the dual loyalty oath, more or less, that's based on. So that's another thing. I mean, watching the ADL kind of ignore real anti-Semitism, which they do, in the way that they give disproportionate coverage to things that are not anti-Semitic. It means that their focus is on those things. There's also a great documentary I highly recommend called Defamation, where an Israeli Jew comes to the United States and like kind of embeds with the ADL. And
oh, really?
They assume because he's an Israeli Jew that he's not going to be critical, but he is very critical of them. But I think that, I think it's really important, and there are a lot of Jews who say, like, not in our name, or there's Jews Against Occupation, Jewish Voice for Peace. I think it's a terrible thing that people have used an extermination to justify ethnic cleansing.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think it's a tragic irony, right? Yeah. So what's next for you, Katie? You got the Katie Halper show, you've got Useful Idiots. What else is you got in mind for yourself?
YouTube.com/The Katie Halper Show, YouTube.com/Useful Idiots, Patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show, UsefulIdiots.substack.com. I'll keep doing interviews. I want to do more monologues. What else am I going to do? I'm still interested in this show that I pitched to The Hill, which was a leftist version of The View. And we had shot a pilot for that, and we released one segment. It did really well in terms of numbers. So again, The Hill was not unhappy with my performance until this happened. So yeah, I'll just keep on keeping on. I had Norman Finkelstein on my show. I'm going to do a big panel. I'm not sure when yet, where a big panel with people who have been censored or fired over this issue.
Oh, that's a great idea. Well, please.
And I'm also going to do a panel with guests who are in Israel or the occupied territories, so that'll be, my show streams 7 p.m. on Tuesdays, but this one will be a Sunday during the day, because obviously people in that area of the world are later there. So in order to have them on, it'll have to be Sunday daytime. But if you subscribe at youtube.com/The Katie Halper Show, you won't miss it.
Good. And you're hanging in there otherwise? These life events can be stressful.
Yeah, they're stressful. It's depressing. I've gotten a lot of support. I wrote an op-ed about it for the Daily Beast. Rashida Tlaib tweeted out very nice things about me. Roger Waters tweeted something out. Susan Sarandon retweeted stuff. And then mostly, honestly, like the most moving thing is hearing from Palestinians who are express gratitude, which, I mean, they don't need to. I mean, it's really nice to hear that. And also some Jews who are like, as a Jew, I'm, glad to see you put that position out there. So, yeah.
Good. I'm glad to hear that, and keep us posted on what's going on at Katie Halper. Thanks for all the great work you've been doing. Thanks for speaking out on this issue, and thanks for coming on the program.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
And we'll be right back after this. I am Richard RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour.